blurry at the city if you have questions on that.
Okay. Or ask me out offline. I've got some information too.
Okay. We are live.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 9th, 2022 Ashland Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. I'd like to call to order at 6 p.m. First on agenda is approval of the minutes. We have a study session from February 2nd. I have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from the February 2nd meeting.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have another meeting on February 9th, a regular business meeting. Do we have someone to make a motion on that, please?
I move to approve the February 9th business meeting minutes. I wasn't at the meeting, but I'm happy to approve them. Oh, sorry, the February 9th meeting, I wasn't. Let me see. I looked at the minutes, but I can't remember which one I was at and which one I wasn't. I wasn't at the last one.
Well, normally if you weren't at the meeting, we usually abstain from voting.
The February 9th one, I think I was at, if I am remembering correctly here. Anyway, maybe Commissioner Lewis maybe could.
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
And I'll second. But so if you were there, Commissioner Bell, please vote. But if you weren't there, please abstain. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, so we passed, we've got the minutes approved, and now we'll move on to addition deletion for the agenda. And I do have one deletion. We're going to, the silent disco and movies in the park proposal is going to be postponed. We need to, further information before we move forward on that. So that will come up at a later time. And does anyone else, does staff have any other additions or deletions they want to discuss? No. Okay. All right. Then next on the agenda is public forum, but my understanding is we don't have anyone signed up for a public forum, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. And I would tender a motion here.
I move to recognize the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Next on the agenda is our director's report. Director Black, please take it away.
Okie doke. So I want to give a couple of updates. One, the East Main public meeting happened last week on Thursday. It was very well attended. I feel like our consultants did a very good job at presenting a preliminary plan, and that preliminary plan had a lot of detail in it, but not near as much as will be in it when we get closer to a final plan. We were able to see kind of how the East Main Park is being proposed to be organized. There are certainly some changes that will come as a result of the meeting. We will be going over all of the comments that were made as we did in the meeting, and also meeting again with the committee that is working on this with the consultants and talk to them about the feedback that was received at the meeting. Overall, there was a lot of support for the park. I think there are a few minor things that we need to iron out. And then the next step from here would be to present to the Parks Commission and show you, all of the Parks Commissioners, in another public meeting, the preliminary plan with changes that came about as a result of the public meeting. And then we would start working to move towards a final plan, which would include working with others, directly with other interest groups and other committees that we know of that have expressed interest in working with us and talking to us about the design of the park. Those groups include, dog park, people who are associated with the dog park and the activities there, the Rogue Valley Mountain Bikers Association for the Pump Track and Skills Park, the community gardeners, pollinators, Bee City USA, and many other people and other groups as well as we go on. We'll be talking to about this. So another item to update you on is the Lithia pickleball courts. As everyone knows, most likely we have transitioned the pickleball courts or the tennis courts in Lithia Park from tennis to pickleball. We did have to use our warranty on the surface and have the surface redone this year. And that was accomplished. And we are still working on a few other items of repair to the fence and a few other things. The getting contractors right now and being able to keep them working and consistently is a little bit of a problem. We do have contracts with the fencing company and a contract company. However, we have had to work with their schedule, which is very busy. So the tennis courts or the pickleball courts are open. People can use them. If you go and there's no sign saying otherwise, you can use them. The nets are not up yet for the most part. The lower courts, we need to still work on those, and we will get those open permanently as soon as possible. But in the meantime, pickleballers, if you go to Lithia Park and there's no sign saying otherwise, you're welcome to use the pickleball courts. The Senior Services Division provided an update, and they wanted to let you know that activities from classes to movies have resumed in March and are attracting more and more participants. Many senior classes at the Senior Center in the Grove are filling to capacity. More seniors are returning to Food and Friends congregate lunch, and patrons are expressing gratitude for having this beloved communal space back, allowing them to connect and engage in person again. And of course, we're talking about the Senior Center. The Recreation Division also provided an update. The Grove, this is another other update on one of our indoor facilities, is filling up with classes and activities again. We are taking the opportunity to retrain the instructors and participants on using the building, since it has been a while since we have had people using the building. And a lot of times the instructors are responsible for entering the locked building and locking it up when they leave again after their classes in the evenings. Staff is also working on a handful of special events that will be happening this spring, such as a bike swap, nature playground celebration, and bird day, and many more to come as well. So we're excited that we're moving forward and going back to something close to normal, we hope, with the restrictions easing up with COVID over the weekend, this coming weekend. We're looking forward to seeing people's faces again. So anyways, we will be updating you further on meetings and things like that as we go forward. And since we're still meeting digital or virtually as we go forward, and the opportunities are available for us to meet in person, we will be working with you on getting that scheduled. Now, that being said, I just want to go back to the East Main Park again really quick. Having virtual meetings has been a benefit in some ways. We have been able to, in many ways actually, we have been able to engage a lot more people than we generally would. And I think we see this in many areas and committees that I'm involved in, where, on the state level, where we had meetings every other month and never had more than one or two people show up to listen to the business taking place, we'd end up with 20 or 30 people all of a sudden. And so participation went up on that end. We're also seeing it here. And there's direct evidence to show that the virtual meetings provide an opportunity for people that wasn't there before. The East Main Public Meeting, we had over 90 people in attendance participating in that meeting, which was great. Now, I'm not trying to make an argument for continuing virtual meetings into the future, but as a tool, I think it's something that we would, or the public would benefit from if we just kept that tool in our toolbox and considered using it in the future, or a hybrid approach in the future to ensure that we are making all attempts possible to get public involved, make public involvement feasible for everybody. So
great idea. Yep, I totally agree.
Okay. So that is my update today.
Thank you, Director Black. Next on the agenda is under unfinished business is Kaye Guanajuato regular season lease agreements and consideration of a fee increase. And staff, take it away.
Thank you. Just a quick note, Sean, it looks like Marcus got disconnected from the meeting. Maybe you could just forward him another invite while I'm talking. That would be great. I think he wanted to speak. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Again, I'm Rachel, and I'm the Deputy Director for Parks and Recreation. And for those who don't know me that may be watching, let me get my 1 second here. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Kaye Guanajuato and lease agreement, not only the regular season lease agreements, but also consideration of a fee increase. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Great. Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. So like I was saying, each year, the Kaye Guanajuato is leased out to restaurants and the Lithia Artisans Market for use of the Kaye. And within the last couple of years, the Lithia Park front of the park as well. So for this year, for 2022, we have 10 applicants for use of the Kaye. And they're listed there. A couple, name changes, things like that. But everything is pretty relatively, quote unquote, normal. This is the Kaye Guanajuato draft boundary map. And this is something that seems to be ever changing and evolving. But basically what this indicates is the purple spaces are all artisan spaces. So when the artisans are operating on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, those are the spaces that they can get. The red spaces all indicate where restaurants are allowed to put tables and chairs. And again, within those red spaces, staff does negotiate with each of the restaurants certain designated square footage within those red spaces. The blue spaces on here, they're shared spaces. So those are shared between. They could be shared between two restaurants. They could be shared between the artisans and the restaurants. So there's only a few. You see only a few of those on here. The areas that we're proposing to change or update for this year are in red. So if you're looking on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see S-3, which is the blue space between R2 and A1. And that's a proposed shared space for the artisans and the restaurant. So it could be used by the artisans if needed. So that's one proposal. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the other proposals. So we have A9 and R6. We actually switched those two. Last year they reversed. So last year they were reversed. We have the R6A, which is the side where the Kaye Guanajuato mural is located. And then we also have A9A, which is just outside of the Kaye on the bridge that the artisans will be using this year. Go ahead, Commissioner Lant, you had a question?
Two questions. One, will the artisans be using the space in front of the Public Works community building?
Yes, so the artisans will be using the community development parking lot. They will also be using spaces in front of the Public Works building, 2 spaces there, as well as some other hardscape places across from next to the park. So they do have some hardscape places that they will be using.
Thank you. Then my other question has to do with the south entryway. It shows the space up against the mural as being larger than the space on the creek side. I assume, is that correct, or that's a change, or is that just an issue with the drawing? That's
just an issue with the drawing. It's not meant to look that big. It's just that big.
Thanks.
So, yeah. Okay, so moving on. The Lithia Artisans, staff is proposing for the Lithia Artisans Market to be able to utilize the front of Lithia Park. And that's been something that the commission approved back in 2019 during the COVID pandemic, when the pandemic first began. And the history of that is because we needed more room for the restaurants to spread out and be outdoors. We made the accommodation for some of the booths for the Artisans Market to move into the park. And that includes the front of the park as well as the park, I guess you call it the park row, which is the area where the trees are between the street and the sidewalk. The Lithia Artisans Market has really benefited from this change since 2019. There is more, it does allow for more visibility for the public, welcoming them into, downtown on the weekends, more hustle and bustle. And it has also allowed the restaurants on the Calle more space for their seating. And as far as when the artisans do utilize the park, the way that they put the booths, they do put booths in between the trees on the park row. They also put booths kind of around the outside edge of the front of the park, kind of in a circle. In working with our staff and speaking with our staff, we haven't had any uncharacteristic damage associated with that use. But one of the things that staff will be recommending tonight is to have basically to put into the motion that APRC will have to pull back on the use of the front of the park if there is any, if they see any uncharacteristic damage. Commissioner Lant?
I think my hand just never got lowered.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, and this picture, by the way, I couldn't find a better picture. This booth here is actually, I believe, in the park row. And then there are people, it looks like there's a booth kind of directly behind that, kind of kitty corner in the park area. So the Calle Guanajuato mural, we did have some feedback from members of the public within the last year or two about, table seating next to the mural, and people concerned about the mural itself. And, staff, myself and other staff, I have been keeping an eye on the mural, and there is some minor damage on the mural. So, and it's table, some of the damage is above table height. Some of it is below, like little nicks and chips. What we did is we were able to work with some of the community members that had the concern with the mural and the restaurant that benefits from seating next to the mural. And we came up with a agreement that will be put in writing that the Scout, the restaurant that is there, will put some tape on the ground next to on the Calle that will depict where the tables and chairs can go. So maybe it won't be up against the mural itself and, prevent chipping. They're also going to put on each of the tables a small sign talking about the mural itself and asking people to, treat the mural with respect by not touching or damaging it. And then they're also going to pay for repair of small chipping on the mural itself. And so they're the group that we're working with is reaching out to a local artist who did help with the original painting of the mural, and that person will actually do some of the touch-ups. So I feel like moving forward, we do have a good plan in place, and obviously, staff will keep an eye on it. So that's one thing that we're asking to move forward with tonight as well. Okay. So the next thing is there's a lot of decisions to be made tonight and a lot of motions to be made. But one of the other things that came up during the pandemic and within the last 2 years is, many restaurants saying, wow, it'd be great if this could be more of a year-round operation. Like we could, seat outside more often. It's a good benefit to us. So one of the things that I'm going to be asking tonight is for you all to consider an 8-month season. So the usual season, historic season of operation, which is March 12th through November 11th, 8-month season. And then also within that, consider and tacking onto that and adding a 9.5-month season from March 12th through December 31st. So restaurants could pick either an 8-month season or a 9.5-month season. And that gives them opportunity to utilize the CAE more if they would like to. The other thing I'm asking for is allowing for off-season agreements. So those are the off-season we're considering is January through mid-March of 2023. And the restaurants who would be eligible for that would already have to have had an application in for those spaces. And they could utilize those spaces in the quote unquote off season from January through mid-March. The next thing is a fee increase. This is something that we've been looking at for a while. And so basically, if you look at the current fee and you break down the current fee, it's $8 per square foot for an entire 8-month period. So basically that breaks down to $1 per square foot per month for 7 days a week for someone utilizing a 7-day-a-week space. So basically what we did is we looked at the CPI, the CPI for December, which was 7%. And we decided to go with a 7% increase, which would make these fees. So for somebody renting a 7-day-a-week space, it would be $1.07 per square foot per month. For a weekday only space, so for a restaurant who's only seating 5 days a week, it would be 66 cents per square foot per month for weekdays only. And for the weekend only rate, 2 days a week, which actually only applies to the artisans market, it would be 73 cents per square foot per month. So this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like for the artisans and the restaurants. So the current, on the left-hand side, you see the current fee of $8 for an average restaurant space of 500 square feet. The current fee would be $4,000. And if they're renting for 9.5 months, that fee is going to be $4,750. With our 7% increase, to the right, you see that the per square foot fee is $8.56 for the 8-month contract, $10.16 for the 9.5-month contract. So those are the $4,280 would be a typical 500 square foot space. $5,080 would be a 9.5-month space. Commissioner Bell?
Rachel, you say that the average restaurant space is 500 square feet, but the average artisan space is 2,300 square feet. Do you mean a space divided between many different stalls?
Yeah, the artisan space, basically every artisan booth is about a 10 by 10 space. Right, so I'm just adding in, I'm just saying on average, 2,300 square feet is what the artisans use. That's what they're on a contract basis.
That's
So
the
that's
entire
why.
Kaye. That's all the area along the Kaye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you look at, so the average is 500 square feet for the restaurant space. If you look at 1,000 square feet restaurant space below, that's the highest amount they would pay under this proposal. If that makes sense.
One of the small questions. So you said CPI increase, you mean consumer price index increase?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Though for the Western region. Yeah, that's the one we use. Let's see. So for this one, this is for, sorry, I have to move my thing around here. So this would be for the off season. So, you know, we're thinking that the off season weather might be worse. And so we're looking at a 40% decrease of fees for the off season. And that's based on the 7% increase. So a restaurant wanting a 7-day-a-week space would pay the 64 cents per square foot. For a weekday only, they'd pay 40 cents per square foot, and the weekend only 44 cents per square foot. So that would be for the artisans, which they most likely would not do that. So for 2.5 months of time, a 7-day-a-week restaurant averaging 500 square feet, they would pay the $800 for that 2.5 months. And now we are on to the recommendations, the staff recommendations. Unless there are questions, I can just run through these. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Bell.
One other question I had is you've got sort of 3 different seasons that people can sign up for. It seems like it might be simpler and more practical to have 2 seasons, like a long summer season and then a single winter season, and everybody would have the same length of summer season and 1 winter season.
So the artisans are interested in utilizing the long season along with some restaurants, and there's some restaurants that aren't interested in doing the short season. So actually this way makes it a little bit easier for me. And I don't think it's actually going to be too difficult, because on the back end with our with how it's going to be organized, I can just create a form that, you know, people check if they're going to do 8-month or 9.5 month. Here's the range. I think it actually will be pretty easy to track this way, just based on the feedback I've gotten from the groups that are utilizing it.
Okay.
So what I'm looking for tonight is approval of the boundary map as it's presented tonight. I'm looking for a motion for the Artisans Market to use the front of the park. So we are recommending approval of that, but within a window of April 1st. They cannot use the front of the park prior to April 1st or after November 1st, and staff reserves the right to temporarily suspend use of Lithia Park lawns and park row if rainfall creates soggy conditions. So that gives our staff some wiggle room as far as checking on the conditions. They would let me know, and then I would call the artisans and I'm sorry, you can't use it this weekend. It would give us a little bit of time to work with the artisans on getting them moved. Commissioner Lant.
Yeah, I didn't. I'm not going to request that we make any changes to this tonight, but for next year, I think it's important that we show a map of what's happening in Lithia Park. I know, thinking back, I was surprised at what was being used. I thought it was just going to be the park row, but it turned out it's more than that. And I think there's some questions too about what's even the best. I think we should be working a little bit on that space. I think there's a way of reducing the harm to the wear and tear on the lawn and providing more space for other uses. So I think I think a map with, again, pictures with 1,000 words, and I think in the future going forward, we should have a map showing what we're talking about. Yeah, sure. And I agree with that. And I apologize. Actually, the Artisans manager, Marcus Scott, did include a map
on in his proposal, and it's just not included in here tonight. So we'll make sure that is shored up a little bit more for next year, and I'll make sure that's on the list.
Thank you.
So number 3, extending the season of operation for the agreement, allowing for 2 seasons, either 8-month or a 9.5 month, and letting groups choose what they'd like to do. And just make sure in the motion that that there's a plan to remove equipment, chairs, tables if a flood threatens if a flood threatens the Kaye. Commissioner Long, did you have your hand up, or is that still? Thank you. Okay. Number 4, allow for off-season agreements for restaurants to utilize the Kaye for seating, and that would be the January 1st through March 10th of 2023 for any restaurants that are interested in that. The increase of the fees for the 2022 season of operation up to 7% as proposed tonight. And the decrease of the fees for the off season with a decrease of 40%. Commissioner Lant?
Yeah, the pass screen, why does it say up to 7%? Isn't it just 7%?
Yeah, that should just be 7%. That's a typo. Commissioner Bell, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, do you want to back up one more slide and then we can start making these motions?
I can actually, I just wanted to get through these really quick and then we can go back.
Just a point of order. We're not going to make any motions until we've gone through all of them, until Marcus Scott, who is wanting to speak, has spoken. And at that point, then we can tender motions.
So this is the fee for the off season as proposed. And then also the approval or denial of the 10 agreements for the Kaye. So those are the 10 restaurants, or sorry, the 9 restaurants and the Lithia Artisans Market. Just a few, I'll just throw this back up on the screen while I'm talking. Just a few other things. I have met with multiple restaurants already. Things, people are starting to get things squared away for the season. I have not received any. I sent the email out with all the attachments on the for the proposals, for the fee proposals. I have not received any feedback at all on the fee proposal from the restaurants or the artisans. And I think I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that everyone was informed that we were going to be having this discussion. So people have had time for ample input. And I think that is it for me until we're ready for motions.
We can't hear you, Rick.
Can we bring in our speaker? We have someone from public, I believe Marcus Scott wants to speak in the forum.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi. Do you want me to just start, Rick?
Yeah, just go ahead. We'll give you 5 minutes, but please hold it to that or less.
Yeah, I think I can tap it in less than that. So first off, I'm Marcus Scott. I'm the manager of the Lithia Artisans Market, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Artisans Market. And I'd like to thank the commission for having me here tonight, and Parks and Rec staff, particularly Rachel, who has been working closely with me over the past 2 years as we've made our way through this pandemic to hopefully the other side of it here. I tell folks it's like I'm taking a master class in how to run an artisan's market during a pandemic. And for the past 2 years, we've truly been the face of downtown Ashland on the weekends. We keep showing up. Tonight, I'm here in support of pretty much all the recommendations of staff. Just so you guys know, Lithia Artisans Market is perfectly fine with a rate increase of 7%. That seems super reasonable in our opinion, especially after the last 2 seasons. We also like the option of the longer season, the 9.5 month season. And whether or not we would use it in the winter months, that would be something I'm not sure about. I can talk to my board about that, but that is an interesting concept. So we're in favor of all those possibilities, potentialities. But specifically here tonight, I thought I would be here, number one, to put a face on our organization and to be here to answer any questions that you guys might have, but also give my 10 cents worth on how I think it's gone over the last couple of years. So specifically, I'm here to talk about the front of the park and our use of it, as described by staff. Why does it work? And why has it become so vital for us and really, honestly, the restaurants? Well, number one, more space has been the COVID solution for the last 2 years, but it's more than that. It's more space allows us greater flexibility. More flexibility equals more opportunity for me to cooperate with the restaurants when it comes to give and take on space. If we continue to lose space in Kayuanawatu without any reprieve in some other form, like the front of the park, like the hard spaces that we've discovered, like the front of planning, then of course we're squeezing ourselves out, and we are in the process of growing. We have a number of jury committee meetings coming up. I have about 7 or 8 of those, and the market should be growing, and we should be getting back to our pre-COVID numbers. Visibility is vital, and we've really learned a lot over the last 2 years. This has been like an experiment for me. Having that line of sight, whereas in the past we've always been behind the plaza, so you really have to find us to find us. Now you can actually see us from different locations on the plaza. If you're cutting across and you've just had a piece of pizza at the crosswalk there, and you just happen to glance towards the park, you can see a single booth there, and that draws you over. That draw has been huge for us. We've been running our market pretty lean in terms of a lot of the spending because we've had to just keep the thing running. And we have found that our artists per capita, per vendor out there are doing as well as they were doing in 2019 while we're still running lean. That is a really good sign, in my opinion, that visibility is making a huge impact on our organization. People really like it. The feedback that I've gotten from visitor and local alike is that they love it, and they're wondering why we didn't do it sooner. It's, we're not a willy-nilly organization. This Artisans Market is actually coming into its 40th year. This is our 40th season. We're a juried art show. It's all high-quality, locally made stuff. It really doesn't get more local. And, that art festival vibe, you can ask Scout, you can ask the restaurants that are there and our partners in this experiment how it benefits them, and I think that they would all mostly come back and tell you, yeah, that's been of a huge benefit to us as well. So I really believe that it's increasing revenues for everybody, that visibility. What are the benefits to Parks and Recreation? Number one, we're the space. I have very close attention to the space, especially in front of the park, especially when we're on the grass. I really try to make sure that my artists that are in those spaces understand that they should be moving on a regular basis, so that if they're there week in and week after, they move a little bit. They move a little here and there. And so they try to have less impact on that lawn. We have eyes on the area, which is kind of like a form of environmental policing. There's been a number of opportunities, let's say situations, where we've had some unruly folks. We had one situation where a guy was carving into a tree, and we saw that happening, and we were able to get the authorities down there to take care of things. I honestly think that when we're out there in front of the park, it makes for a really family-friendly environment. Everybody is welcome, and we really are able to multi-use the front of that park. Number 4, there's more money for parks when we spread out. It's just straight up the fact. You guys are going to make more money from us. You're going to make more money from the restaurants. We're a built-in city attraction, and Llama is just asking for the opportunity to continue to grow. This has been a great 2-year experiment. Like I said, we've learned a lot. We've learned to thrive during hardship. And we're just asking to keep growing and learning, and having Parks and Rec learn with us. Looking here at the commission, I will especially reach out to Rick here and say that you came out on a regular basis to kind of check in with me, and I really appreciate that, so that you had a firsthand knowledge of what's going on up there. We keep showing up. I have a question for Rachel in the future, but I will probably do that after the fact. But I want to know if there's any questions from the commission. And I saw that Rick had his hand up and then Sean.
Mr. Scott, I just want to alert you that your 5 minutes has expired. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rick, you're unmuted.
Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate you coming and joining our meeting, and thanks for your thoughts, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, I hope one of you have the 8 or 9 potential motions in front of you that you can read them rather than just winging it. And actually, Rachel, why don't you go ahead and put those up?
I can do that.
Rick, I have the list of the suggested motions here.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
When we get down to the second to last one, slow down because I have a suggested change to that one. I'll make that motion.
So the first motion, I move to approve the 2022 Cayuga Guanajuato boundary map as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Rachel, you can go ahead and take this off.
Okay.
Okay, we have been moved and seconded. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Okay, call for the question then.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis? Yes. Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the second motion is, I move to approve the Lithia Artisans Market use of the front of the park during the regular 2022 season with no use of lawn or grass areas prior to April 1st or after November 1st. APRC staff reserves the right to temporarily suspend use of Lithia Park lawns and Park Row if rainfall creates soggy conditions.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on this one?
I think this is a great idea. I mean, I think as Marcus was pointing out, it's really added a lot of dynamic activity to the front of, or to the Lithia Park Plaza area. So I think it's a good idea.
Okay, if there's no other comment, let's call the question.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis? Yes. Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the next motion is, I move to approve increasing the Cayuga Guanajuato commercial use fees by 7% for the regular season.
I'd second that.
Thank you. Any comments on this?
I think it's just an indication of APRC and APRC staff efforts to, make sure that our services are being properly compensated. And I appreciate that people are working on making sure that our revenue is appropriate to the services that we provide. So thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, question, please.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis? Yes. Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the next one is, I move to approve an 8-month season, March 12th to November 11th, 2022, and a 9.5-month season from March 12th to December 31st, 2022, giving a choice to restaurants in the Lithia Artisans Market to extend the months of the season of operation with a plan in place by November 1st to remove equipment, chairs, tables, etc., if a flood threatens.
Do we have a second?
I will second that. Yeah.
Any discussion? Call for question.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Excuse me. Commissioner Lewis? Yes. Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next motion is, I move to approve an off-season agreement for January 1st, 2023, March 10th, January 1st, 2023 to March 10th, 2023 for any interested restaurants.
I'll second
Variety.
Any discussion on this one?
No, this seems to have been a benefit to the market, and so it seems like a great idea, and the restaurants.
And I just want to hear from staff that they're going to be able to do all the maintenance work they need to do under this regime.
Yes, we will be able to do the maintenance work under this regime.
Thank you. Okay, call for the question.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, if I may, I'd like to make the next motion. I think it's a little clear to say. I move to approve staff's proposed off-season fee schedule. Do you have a second?
Second.
I guess I'll just to make the motion. I want to say that I think it's confusing to talk about a decrease. It is just a fee schedule, and talking about a decrease, I think, could be confusing. And I think as long as we've made it clear with the motion made that what we're doing, and I think that's sufficient. Any other comments? Call for the question.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the last motion is I move to approve the 10 lease agreements for the Kayak Guanajuato for the 2022 season.
You have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on this one? Call for the question.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. So I'd just like to say I want to thank staff for all the work they put into this. This was probably the most complicated set of proposals we've had on the KIA, and we've had some complicated ones in the past. But I also think this was it was tuned to the needs of both APRC and to the restaurateurs and the artisan market who are renting the space. So I'm just kudos to you folks. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Lewis.
I would agree with that, and also thank Rachel for being so adaptive over all these years and taking input from all the different sides and melding them all together, and then giving us policy that is very level-headed and brings in more revenue, and then seems to make everybody at least pleased with how this KIA is going. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really pleased with the way that everything has moved forward this year. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to new business. First order of new business is the second quarter budget report from staff.
So we do this quarterly budget report every quarter, if you can imagine. And Tara Keywell has presented the report for you, and I'll turn it over to her to run through that.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay. So as Director Black just mentioned, we bring you a quarterly financial report. And tonight, this is the second quarter update for fiscal year 22, which is September through December. And the budget summary that we'll be reviewing is the financial report as of January 31st. and that's our most current financial report. I also included a link in the memo for the city's financial Q2 report for your review if you'd like. So APRC has 3 funds. We have a general fund, which is our operating fund, our CIP fund for capital projects, and also our equipment fund. The chart on the screen shows our general fund expenses broke down by department, which in those expenses includes our personnel and our material and services. For January, our target percentage is 57.10. Oh, yeah, 58.33 is our target, and we're coming in at 57.10. So we're a little below target to date. That being said, as you just heard from Rachel, that the consumer index pricing has gone up quite a bit this year. And so we're not immune to those price increases in utilities and fuels and materials. And also extreme heat last summer caused us to use more irrigation and potable water. So we're watching out very closely and coming up with a plan. So the general fund revenue is where our property taxes come in. Currently, we're at 50.8% of the budget at $4,308,691. Within that general fund revenue, recreation revenue is $642,592. And when we created this budget, if you can remember, it was really hard to know what was going to happen with COVID restrictions. And we were a little bit on the conservative side on our revenue, and we didn't know what was going to open up. So as you can see, like our Kaye Wanawatu revenue and the restaurant leases is up a little bit. And also our outdoor recreation has done really well. And as you can see from the Daniel Meyer pool, they're almost completely at their budget for the fiscal year. And our ice rink had a really good season. They've exceeded what we budgeted. And the golf course has done quite well. They're hitting their targets. So the bottom line for our general fund is that our total revenues as of January are $4,308,691. Our total expenses were $4,064,990. And the beginning fund balance from last fiscal year was $1,793,398. And that creates the current fund balance that you see. What I want to draw your attention to is that ending fund balance, we're using a large portion, 1.3 million, to balance this year's budget. So effectively with our projections, it's estimated that our funding balance is really around 493,000. And I just wanted to give you a quick update on our capital improvement fund. Food and beverage taxes are collected quarterly, and the first quarter of collection was $197,788. We had budgeted that at $562,000, which is a little bit of a conservative estimate, and it looks like it's going to hit target. So we're at 35% currently with one quarter of food and beverage that has been collected. And that is the end. That's all I had to update you with tonight.
So I'll just jump in there. Thank you, Tara. That was a very good and informative presentation. And, I think the bottom line here is we are on track for what we have budgeted as far as expenses go and revenues. And we are continuing to to see things improve as far as recreation goes, and we hope to see that translate into more and more classes, more and more outdoor activities, and uses that bring in revenue. I do have to bring up one thing though, and Tara already brought it up, but we don't expect there to be much, if any, irrigation season this summer coming from Talent Irrigation District. So we are working on plans right now. They're currently underway. We're formulating plans where we are prioritizing where we will water, where we won't water, and we will bring that information to you and share that with you going forward. As you can imagine, when we are generally watering, say, a park like North Mountain Park with irrigation water, and we have to turn that over to culinary water, the expense goes up dramatically. So I can tell you right now, if we don't have an irrigation season with TID, we will not be able to water all of our parks. We will not be able to afford that or water it in a way that people are used to in a general, a regular summer, if you will. So just FYI on that, I do think that's also the responsible action to be taken in a year where we do have a drought condition, where we have drought conditions and limited water to go around. Now, the other thing I would say, and I'll talk more about this as we go forward, and this isn't for tonight's discussion, but we do provide opportunities for people to recreate in parks, and we for the density and things like that, and within the city of Ashland, people do need a place to go and recreate, and that's what we are working on now, is prioritization of spaces and which spaces will be prioritized for water and maintenance as we go forward, as we see budgets increase as a result of water shortages. So that was more than you needed to know at this point in time, but just so you know, that is something we're looking forward to. We're looking forward at. And we'll bring more information to you as we go forward.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay. I think this is an item that we need a motion for acknowledgement that we've received this quarterly financial report. Yes, Commissioner Lewis.
I would move to acknowledge the second quarter budget report as presented.
We have a second? All right, seconded. Any discussion?
Should we be approving it or acknowledging it?
Acknowledging it.
Oh.
It's acknowledging it because we're just providing you with data. There's no action to take as far as direction. This is all data that is in the past. We're just providing it for you.
Thanks.
Well, I just want to thank Tara for and the rest of the staff for putting this together. I think it was pretty relatively clear. I did have one question maybe before we get to the vote on the motion, and that is, it looked to me like the golf course was below the expectations in terms of revenue at 58%. Can you just explain that a little bit, please?
Tara, do you want to explain that, or do you want me to? It has a lot to do with when revenues are collected. So we don't have it's not a steady valve that we open up and we receive revenues exactly the same throughout the year for these uses that are especially the uses outdoors. So different times during the year, you'll see different flows.
Okay. Thank you.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's nice to be backed up by the financial expert. Okay, So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. And if there's no more discussion from commissioners, then I'll call for the question.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, next on the agenda is clarification of a motion on management of community center and Pioneer Hall from an action that was taken on January 12, 2022. And if staff wants to make their presentation, please begin.
So this is just that we're asking for clarification on a motion that the background in the meeting seemed to indicate that the motion would have pertained to both the Pioneer Hall and the community center. However, the motion was singular in that it just stated that Ashland Parks and Recreation Commission is not interested in leasing the community center or one building. It just said building, actually. It didn't say which one. So I wanted to bring this back to get direction from you and clarify this motion, but I also want to give you a little bit of other information and a recommendation as well. So generally speaking, the community center and Pioneer Hall are spaces that are rented out by Ashland Parks and Recreation, but technically they're city facilities. The city is responsible for the long-term care and maintenance of those buildings. We do not have control per se of those buildings like we would one of our buildings, like the offices in Lithia Park or the Grove. And because of that, the city charges Ashland Parks and Recreation exactly $15,000 per year to have the right to rent out those buildings and collect revenue on those buildings. In the past, it's cost about $25,000 to $30,000 to run those buildings per building. When you consider the cost of the rent plus the cost of janitorial services and the cost of our staff and the management of those buildings. The community center would mostly turn a profit of a few $1,000s a year. The Pioneer Hall didn't. And that was largely because some of the uses that were in Pioneer Hall were not paid uses. So we couldn't use the building all the time for revenue, although we were still paying $15,000 a year. There was no reduction in that rent from the city. Now, move forward to this biennium, and it was as we were budgeting for this biennium and talking about Pioneer Hall and the community center with the city administrator, as it were, there was didn't look like it was very likely that the community center would even be open during this biennium. So there was no money budgeted for the community center at all, for rent or for utilities or maintenance, anything. Pioneer Hall, on the other hand, even though we were in COVID, there was potential that Pioneer Hall could be used during this biennium. And that is to say that Pioneer Hall wasn't falling apart like the community center was. There wasn't a danger as the community center is currently for the public to use. So it was likely that if COVID restrictions eased up, that Pioneer Hall could be used. But the city administrator and I worked together and we came up with an agreement that we would not pay rent for Pioneer Hall either for this biennium. But we did budget money for utilities and for our janitorial maintenance. And the idea was that the city would not charge us to use the buildings because we didn't know if we were going to be able to. And if we did open the buildings, we would just be able to use those as usual without having to pay rent. So we do have the ability to take care of Pioneer Hall. And I'm going to recommend that we actually do take care of Pioneer Hall and keep that in our portfolio for rentals for the community, because it's one of the only community places that people have to rent. And it's the only one right downtown, considering that the community center is no longer usable. So my recommendation is that the commissioners adopt the motion that states that the declines the request. The commissioners declined the request to lease the community center during the current biennium on the grounds of one, we don't have the money to cover our financial responsibilities for the building, and two, there seems to be a legal liability to take responsibility for a site where we are potentially having people exposing themselves. Now that may not be as relevant with COVID restrictions going away. And number three, because we continue to have some concerns about the marketability of the building as a venue for events, because structural improvements are being made without improvements to amenities. And as background on that, without getting all the way into that, the city had looked at making only the structural improvements to the building and then opening those up. Our position on that, Rachel joins me with this, is that the community center is not rentable in its current condition. It is dilapidated. It has been unoccupied for a long period of time. It was problematic when we were renting it before it closed due to structural reasons. And with the city not addressing those, if the city chose not to address those amenities that improve the usability of the building, we would still be in the same situation with that usability being marginal at best for that building. Rachel, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that you're correct. It's just the marketability and usability of that building with our customers. I think once we open it back up, we would probably get a lot of complaints related to bathroom issues, sound system issues, stage issues. The list goes on. So I think there really needs to be some thought that goes into how that building is reopened.
And that's my recommendation.
Commissioner Bell, do you have a question?
Well, actually, I was going to suggest that I made the motion for this motion.
Well, can we wait on that just a minute?
Yes.
So I wanted to actually add something to your argument, the staff's argument. And that is that there's a real difference between the Pioneer Hall and community center moving forward, because the plan is to actually do a lot of visible renovation on the community center, whereas there really isn't any change being planned for the Pioneer Hall. And so if I just feel like if someone walks into that building after seeing that $300,000 to $400,000 have gone into the structural changes, and it's the same bathroom and the same kitchen, that they're going to go, what is this? What happened? And we, because we're the ones renting it, those complaints are not going to go to the city, they're going to go to us. And I just don't think we need that, in addition to the reasons that staff has given. I don't think we need to put ourselves in a position for that negative publicity.
Agreed.
Commissioner Bell, did you have a motion you wanted to make?
Sure. I move to inform the City Council that APRC declines the request to lease the community center during the current biennium on the grounds that we do not have, we haven't budgeted the funds to cover the financial responsibilities to the building. Also, pardon me, that was number one, that we haven't budgeted the funds to cover our financial responsibilities to the building. And number two, there appears to be a medical legal liability issue if we were to take responsibility for a site where people may be exposing themselves to COVID in a group setting. And number three, because we continue to have concerns about the marketability of the building, as well as the reflection of the condition of the building on APRC as a venue for events, because of structural improvements that have been made without similar improvements to the amenities.
Second that.
You folks have any comments you want to make?
And so everything we've been discussed about Pioneer Hall is a foregone conclusion then that we will attempt to rent it out for the community during this period then, and when it just mentioned the community center in that motion, so
That's my understanding of it.
am I getting it wrong in some way that the Pioneer Hall is still part of our plan? Okay. Yeah.
Any discussion?
So to confirm, Pioneer Hall is expected to be available to be rented to the public.
The way you made the motion, we would take that as Pioneer Hall. Granted that we have the staffing ability to manage it, we would manage Pioneer Hall as a rental space as we have in the past.
And that is, at least at the moment anyway, that is within our capabilities. Like, we are prepared to be able to do that, if I understand correctly.
In some cases, yes. In other cases, we do have to work out the management and the responsibility and staffing. We do have some staffing changes that are taking place. I need to make you aware that I know Rachel does have some concerns about capacity of staff to manage the building. However, I think as direction, if you adopt this motion, the commissioners are giving us direction to do what we can to provide this amenity to the public if we have the capacity to do that. If we don't, I'll come back to you and I'll talk to you and let you know why we don't have that capacity.
Would it make sense to make a second motion that directs staff to, make Pioneer Hall available for rental, assuming that we have a staffing capacity and the resources to meet our obligations?
I don't know that it's necessary. If you want to, you can. I think as management, I think that is how we would approach it, even without a motion.
Okay.
So, commenting on the motion, although I agree with the main motion, I don't agree with one of the three reasons. And one of those three reasons would argue for not opening up Pioneer Hall. So I think, I would vote against this motion unless it was amended. I don't think that reason two, there seems to be medical legal liability to take responsibility for a site where we're potentially having people exposing themselves to COVID in a group setting. Well, if that's a reason for the community center, it's a reason for Pioneer Hall. And so I'm just not willing I just can't vote for that.
So a question for you, Director Black. I think that I was listening to the East Main Public Forum, and I believe that you actually made a comment about the insurance issues related to the new park, particularly related to the pump track, with the idea that, if somebody goes to use the pump track or some part of the park and injures themselves, then because we are providing a public service, and I didn't follow entirely the rest of it. But...
So the background is that the services we provide, generally speaking, in the outdoors that we're not charging for access to, we have what's called recreational immunity, where like if you're running along a trail and the trail is maintained typical to all the other trails, and there's no hazard in the middle of the trail that was caused by our staff or our negligence, and you tripped and fell, which happens on trails, and you skinned your knee, that would be covered under recreational immunity, because it's just part and parcel of using outdoor spaces. When we do have people who we charge for use, it is actually covered under our insurance. So when people rent the building, there are certain insurance policies that we have that would cover certain things within the building that we could potentially have liability for. As far as number 2, this is how the motion was written in the original motion, and that's why it was included again here. I have to agree that based on the restrictions being eased, that I don't believe that we have a liability by any longer once the mask mandate is gone, and as long as we're following any other mandates that come out. I do not believe that we have a liability for people exposing themselves just because it's a group setting indoors any longer.
Okay, I'm happy to scratch rationale number 2 from the motion if that's possible.
You're suggesting an amendment. You want to amend your own motion, is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be to remove point number 2 from the reasoning.
Yes.
And Commissioner Lewis, as the person who seconded, do you support that change?
I support that change.
Okay.
Get us 3 votes.
Well, I think if we left that in, then there would be an argument why we should not open Pioneer Hall, and I don't want that to be the case.
Well, that would also, and it would also go for the senior center and any other building that we maintain. So that makes, I get that reasoning.
Any other discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, call for the question, Sean.
I'm in trouble with my camera. 1 second. There we go. Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're getting winding down our meeting, and this is a time for items from commissioners and staff, if there are any. Yes, Commissioner Bell.
I was thinking about the restoration project that we are expecting to be undertaken by Lomakatsi down through the Ashland Pond property. And we also in the past had heard from the city public works representative, whose name I'm not remembering, about the idea of taking the outflow from the sewage treatment plant down below the pond. And in light of our expected water constraints coming into this year, it seems to me that is there a way to try and use the water from the sewage treatment plant as irrigation water for the plants that are being planted in that general area? I mean, in the past, there had been a suggestion to take as a way of cooling the sewage treatment plant's outflow water to pipe it across, I believe, to the Imperatrice property and have it drain across into the Imperatrice property, because it would go back into the water table. It would, presumably cool the water or at least decrease the impact on Bear Creek. And this seems to be sort of similar. Plus, it would be a more, the water coming out of the sewage treatment plant seems like it's a guaranteed water source for all the new plantings in that area, where I could certainly imagine that if we don't have TID water, we also won't have water to water those plants either.
I think there's a lot in that question, and I don't think I could answer it right now. I can get some information for you and get that to all of the commissioners. And as we go forward, I'll prepare a memo, and I will have to talk with Scott Fleury, the Public Works Director, and Kaylee Cottle was the person who came and talked to you about the outflow project. But yeah, there's a lot in that question, and it's not a bad question, but it's going to take me a little bit of time to get the information. I couldn't answer that right now.
No, and I'm sorry, I don't expect you to answer the question just at the moment. And I don't know that I want to necessarily send you off on a task without the other commissioners agreeing that that's something worth investigating.
Can I just say that I feel like it is worth me talking to Scott Fleury about it, to see how far any investigations in the past have gone and what the initial feasibility seems to be, just based on a conversation with him. And then I could report that back to you. But I do think it's responsible to ask that question, even if it's been asked in the past. And considering the reason why you're asking me to look into that, I do think it's a good question, and I'm just fine going forward and doing that.
Okay. Commissioner Lewis.
And I think that's just part of a much larger question that Director Black brought up earlier about the budget. Is for years the city has been asking citizens to basically kill your lawn, and that we would supply the lawn for the community, and so a lot of that's at risk. So it'd be interesting to hear more on the tactics and strategy of how we're going to get through this summer, and we're going to have to think outside the box, I think, a little bit. And I think that's what Commissioner Bell brought up is ways to get to where we have to go. We have plantings that need water, and we want to do the best we can. We've already we've done a lot in saving water over the years. That's that part. But this is the next level. Hopefully it's not going to go past this next season, but as we know, there is some potential that there's a change coming. So we're going to have to, I think it would be a great discussion point to have our irrigation people and just a general discussion so the community can kind of understand where we're coming from here. We're in the parks maintenance business in a big way. So it would be, for me, it would be very helpful to hear some ideas come out of how we're going to pull this off this year.
It seems sort of, it seems sort of analogous to a household. At least at my place, we do our best to salvage all our gray water and put it back onto our plants. And so it sort of seems like the city we definitely do our best to conserve water, but it seems that at this point, we ought to be considering salvaging whatever kind of water we can from wherever we can find it to keep the green spaces green and keep the trees alive and all that.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's the one thing that I didn't mention earlier about water, and I don't want to belabor this, but we do, as an update, we do have the water system that was approved by the Parks Commissioners being installed within the next few weeks, which is the new watering management and monitoring software and hardware that is being installed that we hope we have high expectations, but we do think that'll help us manage water going forward as well and reduce water, especially when we're talking about breakage and things like that. So,
Terrific.
Any other items?
Not for me.
Okay, well, I'd like to announce some upcoming meetings. We have an Ashland Senior Advisory Committee meeting on March 14th. It'll be Zoom at 4 p.m. APRC study session will be April 6th at 6 p.m. and I believe it's still planned to be Zoom. And the APRC regular meeting is April 13th and at 6 p.m. and it's also planned to be Zoom. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, staff and commissioners, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.